back to the AHA podcast. I'm your host, Anastasia.
And I'm your host, Hannah.
And today, I don't think we're going to have any long intro because I just want to already get into it. And I'm sure if you clicked the title of this episode, you also want to get into it already. So without any further ado, we're going to hop into Oppenheimer and Barbie. I do want to quickly share what order we watched it in because I know it was like a huge debate on the internet of like Barbenheimer, are you going to see Barbie first or Oppenheimer for that whole shebang? So with me, what I did was I watched Oppenheimer first and then had like an hour break in between and then went and saw Barbie. So that's what I did. And I think that was like the perfect way to see it, but that's just me.
No, I think it was the perfect way to see Oppenheimer first and then Barbie. Only because then seeing like, do I want to end, with this being about, the atomic bomb and, the moral dilemma and what led, the country after. And so it was definitely a good thing. So yeah, I watched Oppenheimer last night and then I watched this morning. This is Saturday, July 22nd. Barbie, which was nice. Little rest in between. So
Yeah, you had that good idea. I was like, no, we are gonna go through the entire day. It was, I will say though, a little draining. Uh, by the time Barbie ended and I was home, I was so exhausted. Which like I don't think you assume you'd be exhausted after watching movies, but with all the information that came with Oppenheimer, it was like so much shit that you're like, wait, what? Hold on. And then I like got some snacks and ate some food and then went right away to go see Barbie. So I think my brain was just like, okay, girl, we need to go to sleep and like process everything we just watched. So, but yeah, so that's the order we decided to do it in. I was in the movie theater like while I was waiting for Barbie to start. And there were people there who had done it opposite, who saw Barbie first and then were seeing Oppenheimer. So that was really fun to chat with people to see, what order they were going in, and then all the pink that everybody was wearing for Barbie, and then all the black that everybody was wearing for Oppenheimer was really fun. And I think it made me like love the movies even more, if that's even possible. But like seeing how many people showed up for both movies was really fun to see and kind of created a very nice sense of like community within the film world. I think it was really fun to watch and to see all these little girls in pink taking pictures with the Barbie poster, and like it was awesome. I enjoyed it. So, but
no,
regardless, let's get into it.
I was gonna touch on that. I was gonna touch on the. It was nice because going obviously like opening day, there's nothing like it. But there hasn't been a movie, no offense, that people have. I went to like Super Mario Brothers, but I went to like a kids party of it because it was
Mhm.
my nephew. So it was like some kids dressed up like Mario, or whatever. You wear a T-shirt, but like the fact that everybody in that movie theater was either black or pink or had their Barbenheimer like get up, so it was amazing seeing all the people wearing pink who were watching Oppenheimer, so it was we don't think we've seen a day like that in cinema in a bit, and it reminds me of like going to watch the last Harry Potter movie full get up, and like you didn't
Yes.
give a fuck
Mhm.
in the world because you were like, I'm so excited and embracing it, that even like getting my whole family to be like, not my whole family, whoever I live with right now, like to wear pink, just like, let's just fucking do it, right? Because you saw all these other people, you're like, yeah, let's just embrace it, let's have fun with it. And then you were reminded of like, oh my gosh, how much cinema affects the pop culture of everyday life, of how people have literally, even I saw people in their Barbenheimer shirts and stuff that they made or that they bought, like the fact that this has gotten people, I don't know, like it was an experience. And obviously like with the numbers in the box office, it's showing that people were very, engulfed in all of it. Definitely, they've been promoting their shit out of this for a long time. All of these movies. Barbie was the most on like of 2023 so far on Letterboxd, the most watch list thing. So it's like, hey, like people have been waiting a while to finally watch it, and so it was nice as like a filmmaker to see like, wow, like people to go out in droves to the cinema and to actually like experience that and see how many people on opening day were there. It was really nice. Not the lines to go in, but it was nice to see all these people, like excited, and like a packed cinema, which has, you know, not always like a packed cinema for like a movie where you're like, oh my gosh, hey, like it's a different experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was this group of guys that were in the theater with me with when for Oppenheimer. And they were all dressed up in pink and like had like cowboy hats that were pink, and like you could tell that they were gonna go see Barbie right after, and it was really funny and very fun to see. And then seeing a couple similar faces from Oppenheimer at the Barbie theater, and you're like, oh, this is it's fun, and I feel like it's gonna be like a really interesting pop culture moment to see later in the future, to see like when we look back on um like this whole release date in cinema, which is really exciting. But yeah, do you want to get into Barbie or Oppenheimer first?
Wow, that's the debate of the whole current, yeah, year. Which is better? One is your favorite? Blah blah blah. I wait, real odd. There was this family that they were dressed up in the cowboy outfit from Barbenheimer. The little boy was like the Ken, and then the mom and the daughter were like full on it wearing skates in the movie theater. I was like, okay, y'all, you fucking win for best cosplay, but like,
Oh my
yeah,
god.
you're like, okay. I guess we can start with how we watched it. We can just, even though Barbie's the most fresh in my mind,
Okay,
but I say
that's what I
let's
was
let's
thinking
jump
too.
into
Maybe Oppenheimer
Oppenheimer.
and okay. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I'm not sure why you wouldn't know, but Oppenheimer is Christopher Nolan's newest film that released yesterday, on the 21st of July. And I like I was speechless for so long after. I'm glad I had an hour in between, because I was sitting outside of the theater waiting for Zoe to come to watch Barbie with me. I was literally sitting out there like just like really trying to like grasp everything I just watched within like almost 3 hours. I was like, that's so much information. But let me tell you, I had the best time watching Oppenheimer. And I think it's been a really long time for me personally where I've sat through a movie at that length, but also about that topic, that I was fully immersed the entire fucking time. Not one moment was there where I kind of fell out of it. Um, I really enjoyed it. I also watched an interview with Christopher Nolan where he was kind of talking about his like best like seat to see the movie in, and I saw it in IMAX. Um,
Same.
and so I tried to get a certain seat, which is where he had like recommended seeing the movie from. Um, and I got one seat ahead, like in front of what he had recommended, but I loved the seat I was in because the screen itself was not like too close but not too far away. It felt like the perfect distance to sit away from the screen for that specific movie, because there was not one moment where like I don't know, where anything was too jarring from being too close or anything. Um I think I sat in like H11 or something. I don't know, but it was like a great seat. So I'm glad I watched that interview, and I was like keeping that in mind when I was buying advance tickets. I was like, okay, we need to try to get this seat. Um but did you go by yourself with Oppenheimer, or no, you went with people?
No. See, because I would have done the same as you. I would have watched it literally like back to back, you know, day out. But because I watched it with people who, you know, are employed and have a job, and, you know, everybody's schedules. And then I was like, guys, we went to a 6:30 showing. It's a 3-hour movie, Oppenheimer. And we're like, I was like, oh, we can watch Barbie at like 10:30, or and then everyone was like, no, that's
It's
we're all
too
gonna be
much.
dead after, I mean, like a whole day's work. So we're like, yeah, no, it's fine. We'll just watch it the next day. But with Oppenheimer, it was pretty much packed because we bought it like a week before, and even finding, I mean, there were six of us, including me. So finding six seats by each other was like we did like three and three, like one row and then a row behind. So like it wasn't like the most, you know, perfect thing, but I always, I mean, it's always my thing. If I'm watching Christopher Nolan, I'm watching an IMAX. That's why he, you know, he made it. Definitely want to watch it in like a 70 millimeter, you know, film, biggest, you know, a
Me
bigger
too,
IMAX
absolutely.
screen to do it. But I just really like that. Like, I mean, my family is fans of Christopher Nolan, but like everybody that I went with loved the movie. And it's on a topic, right? Like somewhat familiar with. I mean, it's been a hot minute since I've done American history. um, so there was some things that we all forgot about in like in history wise, like, oh shit, yeah, that's true. Like instance like Hitler died before they, like he died and then they dropped the bomb on Japan. So it's like you forget all the little things. You're like, oh my goodness. Um, so it was nice going with the group and everybody loving the movie because, sometimes, you go watch a movie, you get mixed reviews and all that. But it was really nice to, like, we all were like, no, that was really fucking good.
Yeah, I think I'm glad that I went to go see it by myself. 'Cause I'm not sure who else would come with me. Like, you know what I mean? Like Billy is doing his thing with Kinky Boots, and I was like, he's that man is busy. But then also I was like, I don't know who else like would be as like enthusiastic as I am about this movie. So I'm glad I went by myself. And I'm definitely adding it to like a rewatch list because although I did enjoy it the first time, I think I missed a few things. Of course, your first sit
Oh,
through of a
yeah.
movie, you're probably like, wait, I totally missed it. Like, hold on, let me go back. Um, but definitely rewatching it. I will say, however, there were certain moments where I forgot who was what character, excluding Cillian Murphy, of course, because he's Robert Oppenheimer. So I had him like in my brain and I remembered who his character was. But like Robert Downey Jr.'s character, I forgot his name, and so when they were referring to him, I'm like, wait, who who are we talking about? And then just certain character names I think I missed. And then by the time I remembered who they were, I was like, oh shit. I was like, it's like the movie's over almost. And I was like, oh, of course now I remember who they're talking about. But then they had like Rami Malek play a character that we see a little bit of, and then he comes back towards the end with that whole not
It
trial,
plays a bigger role.
but yeah. And so I was like,
Hearing, yeah.
hearing, thank you, yes. And so there were moments where I was like, shit, I'm forgetting names, but I remember faces, but I don't remember if that's the character that we're referring to. So I was a little confused, so I definitely want to sit back and watch it a couple of more times to remember um, character names. But I I fully think that Cillian Murphy's gonna get an Oscar nom because he I have been a fan of Cillian Murphy for so long. I think the one thing that really solidified my love for him was Peaky Blinders. Um and I remember at the time nobody around me was watching Peaky Blinders, and so I had no one to talk to about it. So it was like my own little thing that I kept for myself, and I love that fucking show. I'm so into like the they're not mobsters, but like what the fuck is the word I'm looking for? But if you see if
I
you've
mean,
seen the
they're
show,
gangsters. They're
gangsters,
gangsters. They're just
thank you,
Irish, so you
Irish
get thrown.
gangsters and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And I I also think that like watching this movie has really solidified my love for historical films. I've always loved historical films. I don't know why. Like when I was a kid, that's weirdly like what I watched a lot of, whether it be movies on like Greek tragedies, or like war movies or whatever it may be. Um, History movies were always my thing. Uh, and I'm not sure. I loved history movies, so I think this movie really solidified my love even more for it. Although I will say, all the physics talk and all this random, I was like, what the fuck are we? I'm like, I'm not into science that way. So some of the terminology and like the hydrogen bomb and blah blah blah. I'm like, wait, what the fuck? I'm like, I don't understand the difference between that. So like, of course, like atomic bomb, nuclear bomb, blah blah blah. But like, there's that moment in the movie where they're in Los Alamos. Is that the little town called? Yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
And they're talking about the bomb or whatever, and that one character, I forget his name. This is one thing that I'm not going to be able to remember names for. The previous episodes, I was like, these names, blah, blah, blah. Right now, don't remember the names. But the one character that I don't know. I want to say he was Russian. I don't know, with like the thicker eyebrows that basically wanted to do the hydrogen bomb, and everybody was like, "You don't know what
Mm,
you're talking about." He has the line of like, until someone builds a bigger bomb. That character. He's in the trailer too. So
yeah.
if you've seen it, you know who I'm talking about. I don't remember his name. Um, But yeah, when he was talking about the hydrogen bomb and like all this stuff, I'm like, I'm so confused on what the difference is between the atomic bomb and a hydrogen bomb. I was like, I don't know the radiuses or anything. So it was a little not triggering, but it was a little confusing for me at certain points to keep up with what they're referring to. And I was like, oh no. I'm like, this is why I should have paid attention in my fucking physics classes, but I didn't. So here we are.
But I mean, that's the thing is it was, I'm not gonna lie, I think everybody went with like it was confusing that like everybody's names of who it was, because then they're like point and they're kind of have like a wider shot and then they're like, oh, that guy, and you're like, wait, who the fuck are you referring to? Like, and then the names, like it was hard to keep the faces with the names, like you knew like, oh yeah, they're physicists, they're all helping on the Manhattan Project, and then you're like, wait, what's his name? But I would add as well, Robert Downey Jr. is definitely going to get an Oscar nom. He was phenomenal in this movie, definitely stand out. Like everybody that was with was like, oh my goodness. And I think this movie surprised me with having like the group of people I went with, yes, they're my family, but we all have different things. And the fact that everybody enjoyed this movie, nobody checked their phone, the pacing of the 3 hour movie, you felt like you were like in it for the long run. You never were like, wow, this is going really slow in the middle. You were like, oh shit, things are picking up. And I even felt like they were picking up at points where you didn't think like it just kept going, like, you know, then the minute they were doing the hearing and then him doing like, you know, getting his security thing and kind of being put on trial as well, Oppenheimer, like it started picking up more when you thought it would be getting slower. So I think that's what kind of helped the pacing of the movie, that you felt engaged, that this is kind of a movie you think, oh, I don't know who I would like, if people would like it, but like from what I'm hearing from a wide variety, people have enjoyed the movie. So it's definitely a movie that you think like, I don't know, like if this is your movie. Of course, it's Christopher Nolan. So yes, it's not going to be spoon fed to you every bit of it to be like, why I'm following everything. But even I think with, first of all, only Christopher Nolan could have made this movie the way he did. Like to be able to, like, I think he was meant to tell this story just with the way that we saw through Oppenheimer's eyes of like how he saw the world, how, you know, he saw fucking atoms on the shit bouncing on each other. And yeah, I'm not a science person either, so it's like isotopes. Okay, I think I remember what that is. But that, because it was so personal and Killian, he like disappeared in Oppenheimer. You didn't like, you really felt like you were there with them. And I think the fast pace and not explaining everything what the physics is, it really gave you that immersive feeling of I am here at this moment in history at these certain points and I am with them. So I am too following along with them. I'm feeling like what they're feeling or going through. And I think it helped in the way, but then also you step back and then you're like, hold on, I gotta watch this again and then add subtitles so I really catch what everybody's saying because what the fuck? Yeah. There was obviously, but yeah. But knowing it's a Christopher Nolan movie, I knew I was gonna be like, wow. But then you think, oh, it would be more enriching if I knew every little thing that they were mentioning or doing it. It's definitely gonna even hold better more for it. But it definitely gave that feeling that no wonder he wrote it in the first person. You completely felt that in the movie, that you were with him all the way through. Even when we got, I mean, I loved that they did just with the editing of it, where it was like 1 and 2 of like fusion and fission, and how we, that's the whole thing with the bomb, that they were showing in the life of how it was playing out, of like one thing is imploding, one thing is exploding, and all of these contradictions. And yes, a little bit the timeline, because you were like, luckily you had Robert Downey Jr.'s hair residing, so you knew, okay, that's before, okay, this is at Princeton, this is here, and then coming that you like caught it, you know, then you're like, okay, this is the order of time that's happening as we're cutting in between stuff, and this is in color and this is in black and white, but you know, here in this, and what the fuck did Albert Einstein say to him? Yeah, all of that. It was really, yeah, well done in the way that like you really felt that you were there, which you haven't, I don't know, I haven't felt that way in a long time in a movie, where you felt like you were just like peeking in on this moment of history, which is a moment that we haven't really got to see in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think I do want to touch on the editing of this movie. Holy shit. Did I fucking love the way this movie was edited? Like, uh, there's there's many scenes in the film that I really really enjoyed, but the one scene that I was so like the entire time I was literally clenched and so anxious is when they're actually dropping the bomb for that test. I was in my seat and I'm like, I know it's, I'm like, I know it's coming. So I was like, okay. And I was like, why am I scared? Why am I nervous? I don't know but I feel like that's the beauty of this movie is that you see like the entire timeline, like how you had mentioned, like as if you were there every single moment of this historical event. So I think the second that they do the test, or at least I felt like, holy shit, like, yeah, we're right there and we're gonna see this thing drop. We're gonna see if it works, if it doesn't. That scene was very intense, and I loved the way that the sound editing was done when it drops and it
Mm.
explodes, but you have no sound yet. And you just hear like the heavy breathing and like the car radio and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, like you hear the actual explosion, which was so, I don't want to say so cool because that's not the right terminology. Bombs dropping is not cool. But within the regards of the way that it was edited, I think it makes sense because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, scientists, I have no idea. When a bomb actually drops, I don't think you hear the explosion right away. So I think that was
Mm-hmm.
really accurate with how a bomb actually works and reacts with when it does detonate. So I really enjoyed it. And there's a couple parts where I noticed, I don't know if other people noticed, during the hearing, like I guess in like the present timeline towards the end of the film, where Oppenheimer is like not defending his action. I forget, but the one guy who's like asking him questions about like being a communist, blah blah blah, whatever, which we'll get into the historical shit about that whole thing. But where the shot is like going in closer, pushing in to Oppenheimer, and then in the background, if you noticed, like the cabinets and everything behind him are shaking, and it looked so cool when he's like talking
Mm-hmm.
about like the guy's interrogating him, and he's like, "So you weren't against the bombing of Hiroshima, blah 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 blah," and it gets so intense, and it's shaking behind him, and then like the lights, not the lights, but like the screen gets a lot brighter. I don't even know what I'm trying to explain,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so good. And then all of a sudden it goes like super calm and quiet, and you're like, I am gonna have a panic attack any minute of this movie because I feel like I'm the one who's in trouble, and I'm the one getting like questioned. And it was just so, there were so many stakes. I think in like almost every scene of the movie, which I think added to that feeling of urgency, uh, which was crazy and super fun to be a part of in a weird way as an audience member. Yeah, and I don't think anybody could have done it the way Nolan did, and he is fucking incredible. I love him so much, and I think this movie really solidified. I've always loved him, but I think this movie really was the movie that was more up my alley as a
Mm-hmm.
consumer. So I appreciate this film probably, a little more than a lot of his other films, but I loved it. There's tiny little nuances between like within the film that I really enjoyed, and then also the aging of them, like
Mm-hmm.
right at the end of the
Was
movie
really
when they're
well.
all older, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, okay, makeup department, you better do your job. That it looks really good, because sometimes when you have actors and they go through like old age makeup, you're kind of like, it looks like makeup. It's not um really what they look like. But with this specific part, I was like, wow, holy shit, that does look really real, and I don't know how to feel about it.
Even though you're like, I don't know who looks like cute though, as though, no, I'm just
As
kidding.
an old person, yeah.
But I have to say, just even the opening, well, first of all, the fact that he used no CGI, which is, I just love that man so much. Like, where they did, like, how could we make the explosion? I mean, yes, I'm going to say a beautiful shot of, the mushroom thing, and they're looking out at it. And definitely with the camera placement to really feel like we were seeing from his eyes, especially when his colleagues come in and have to testify on whether they believe he's loyal or not to the United States. But I really just love the opening thing because, of course, Christopher Nolan read The American Prometheus, which is about the life of Oppenheimer. And like just the beginning lines pretty much set you up for what the story was, you know, where it was like, hey, Prometheus, you know, gave the world fire and look what, you know, what did he get? He got changed to a rock and, you know, beat. So it just kind of gave you the thing of like, wow, like I gave you this power. And then going into the history of it, I love that scene that you're talking about when he was like, what do you mean? Like, where Oppenheimer's like, what do you mean support? What do you mean support? Like, I did my job, right? Like, I'm a theorist. I wanted to see if the theory was going to be right, if we could make this type of bomb. I did what you wanted. And the minute I did it and then was like, oh, do you guys want my help? They were like, nope, we got it from
Bye.
here. And then you're going to be like, you know, why did you come? Why did you, like attacking him? And it's like, okay, like, yeah. But to go into the casting of this. I mean, it's a Nolan film. This man knows how to cast his movies. I mean, he goes in person to them and calls them up and be like, "Here, read the script," you know, and pretty much like I have to laugh when I was watching an interview with the cast and Matt Damon was like, so I was taking a break from film, like from making movies, right? Like I was in couples therapy with my wife, and I was like, "Hey, you need to get on like a break." And then there was like, but there was only one exception that if Christopher Nolan called, I could do the movie. And the fact is that it actually came true because he was during a break at the time. But then Nolan was like that would be me. It'd be like, I'm retiring, but only if this one, you know, if Christopher Nolan is gonna call me up and come give these parts. And even the interesting thing of like, it always pays, I don't know, like in a sense always pays off with Nolan, like looking at Killian, like he was always, you know, this is finally the one of a 20-year, you know, partnership that he's the lead. The fact that Matt Damon played a small role in Interstellar and here he is, or like seeing all the other characters that you're like, oh, he was in something else of Nolan's and he's in this now. And it's just, I don't know, it's also a rare thing to like, it's a joke like, oh, there's no small part, but there's small parts in movies like Rami Malek or Florence Pugh. Like they had reasonably small, you know, there wasn't many lines. They had a few scenes in the movie. They did play like characters that were very important to the storyline. But the fact that like you could get away with being like, oh, I'm only getting like a few lines, but it's a Christopher Nolan movie, so I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Even though I'm an Academy Award winner, I'm gonna play this small part in your movie. Like only in a Christopher Nolan movie would you be like, yes, I'm only doing that. That's fine with me. Just to be on your set, this, you know, be in your movie, I'll go ahead and be in it. And it was interesting because I'm thinking back on his movies. He's not a big like sex scene. There's not many sex scenes in his movie, so it was interesting seeing in this movie. Spoiler: there is, you know, a sex, you know, say two sex scenes. And then the one which I'm laughing at, which was not a funny thing, when they're in the interrogated room and they bring up like his ties with Florence Pugh's character, who's a
Mm-hmm.
communist. And you see it from
And you're like,
his wife Emily Blunt's point of view, and then but then only Florence Pugh could do that because it's like the fact that she's just, you know, grinding on him, looking at her, and then it's like, bitch, I would be over here like, but you know, I'm not a serious actor, so. But yeah, it was just, she played it so well. I think there was a little bit because even in the editing of her scenes, like spoiler, when she like kills herself, but then it's
yeah,
like, did
spoiler
she?
for
Because then you see a
everything.
glove. Yeah, so it's like there was some bits where it's like, oh, I really wish I could understand that character more, or the fact that like because it was from Oppenheimer, you felt like sympathy, even though he was like an egotistical man. And then when they're calling him like womanizer, and you're like, no way. And then you're like, wait, he was also having like a few other affairs, and you're like, you're like, oh shit, he wasn't a perfect man. But this movie, you definitely were like, no, I understand him. And Emily Blunt, for sure. I mean, her accent was like fabulous, but her performance in this movie and showing the okay, first of all, all those babies be crying. They had no quiet babies on this movie. They were like, ah. I'm like, damn, my face though, when he comes home, Oppenheimer, and then his wife is there, like, you know, just in the dark, and the baby's yelling, and then he's like, hey, I'm gonna do the thing. And then he's like, are you gonna get the baby? And she's like, bitch, I've been getting the baby all day.
You go to the baby, bitch. And she grabs the fucking alcohol bottle. It's like, fine. Yeah, that
And
was.
then they like try to drop it off on their communist friends. They're like, hey, like, you watch
Wait,
my
can you watch my
baby?
kid?
Because I don't really want a baby. I'm trying to like do physics here, and my wife is clearly not ready to have a baby either, and is over the housewife thing. But then seeing her defend him and like that whole thing where they're
Oh
like, oh, is she gonna
yes.
show up because they keep pointing that she's an alcoholic, or the fact that she was the one who's like, it's Strauss, like what the heck, like you need a fight, like what are you doing? Like obviously they, in a weird way, they were kind of good for each other at some points, of her pushing him to be like, hey, no, like stand up for yourself. Or when she didn't shake the one man's hand that you referenced before at the end when he gets his medal, because she's like, fuck all of you, like yes, my husband is a lot more polite to you guys, but hell no, you put him through shit, and don't be like a fake little, yeah, rude motherfucker. So she did so good, even though she was like, again, not as much like in it, but even her scenes and the way she conveyed it. And then I mean, you did enjoy her pushing against the Rob guy who was in the committee, who was really like big on interrogating Oppenheimer, and to be like, yeah, you're not getting your security clearance again, to get it when she was like through, and then like showing him up, and you're like, yes, bitch. I think everyone in the theater was like, yes, fucking show his ass. Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, he's like, he never joined the Communist Party. Like, let's get over it. But then you forget how big that was during that time of like blacklisting, and where all those physicists, when they show you later what happened to them, like all these smart people, and because of their communist ties, they were working on the railroad and shit like that, or having to live in exile and whatnot. But yeah, no,
Which
it
is like
was,
crazy to think. I feel like a lot of people forget, historically speaking, with like, especially within the United States and Russia at the time, or the Soviet Union at the time, how like, what's it called? How like worried the United States government was about spies within communism in the United States. And I think that I mean, of course, I like, for me, I forget about that whole thing, so that we don't live in that society anymore, about, communisms and spies and things like that. But watching Oppenheimer and watching this movie, kind of, I think we have to remember how intense that was, and how much, not of a problem it was, but more of how much of it, how big of a concern it was to the United States government. Uh, because then it kind of puts into perspective of like, while watching the movie, trying to figure out like, okay, who is actually your friend within this like community of physicists, because you've got Oppenheimer, who, yeah, like goes to, girl, I don't even remember where he goes to in his like youth to go study. Cambridge? I don't know.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. One of the across the pond. He goes.
Yeah,
Yeah, he goes to
somewhere.
Europe.
He goes to Europe to study, and then meets all these other people. And so when he comes, which I also think is really interesting, is that he did bring, um, not
Quantum
physics,
mechanics. Yeah, quantum
quantum
physics and
physics and
mechanics,
quantum
baby.
mechanics. Yes, thank you.
There's a really
To the
good
United
music video
States.
about quantum mechanics.
What?
Sorry, that's just side plug. There's a really good music video. I'll put the link in there for people to watch. It's about
Period.
quantum mechanics. So
All right,
yeah.
sounds good. Yeah, we'll add that. But I think it's really interesting that he did, because I don't remember learning a lot about Oppenheimer in my history classes, or my like, surprisingly, my science classes and physics classes didn't really. I didn't really know much about him. I'm gonna be honest with you, until I heard about this movie coming out. Like when the casting was first announced and that Nolan was tied to it and everything, and I was like, oh, cool. And so I looked more into it, and I was like, oh, don't remember ever learning about this man, which I think is crazy, because this
Oh
man
really? I learned a
literally,
bit about him.
I don't, I also didn't take a lot of physics classes. I had like
I mean, I
like,
never took physics, but more in history, I learned him. I learned
interesting. I
about
don't
him.
ever remember hearing his name drop, unless it was within like Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Pearl Harbor, that whole thing. That maybe we like had name dropped him a little bit, but I don't remember fully going into his life and all of that, and how the atomic bomb came to be, which I think is pretty sus, but okay. Um,
What are they teaching you in Ohio?
Nothing important, girl.
I was gonna
Not
say,
quantum
I
physics.
remember from yeah, no, well that's too, yeah. But what I remember more is I remembered Albert Einstein not getting attached to it. So that part of the story I knew probably the most well. And I remember being taught like why Albert Einstein he did his E equals MC squared knowledge, but why he didn't go and help with the Manhattan Project and stuff. Like, that's the part that I always remember more, that I felt like weirdly, not that they enforced it, but just from what I remember. And then, of course, knowing that, like, oh, Oppenheimer's the father of the atomic bomb and what the Manhattan Project was and all that stuff. But yeah, it all depends on what state you live in.
Girl, I
But not
guess
obviously
so.
nothing close to any of this stuff in the committee. But of course, you knew, like, with McCarthy and what he was doing with Black. So when they were dropping McCarthy's name, you kind of knew, oh yeah, this is around the same time. And I think you also forget is how this war, though this war ended and we were allies with Russia, how then that led into the Cold War of when we were not allies anymore with Russia. So it's all funny and like interesting. Like, at what point in time are you like, we're enemies, and then you're like, you know what, never mind, and how that kind of fed into the whole thing about the Cold War of, it was all spy and espionage of being like, what do they know? What type of weapons do they have and whatnot? So it was interesting to be reminded of how that all started playing in and how much they were on him of like, did you tell the Soviets, your friends, the Soviets? And then come to find out it was the one guy you didn't expect, which was so funny, which is always the case. You're like, oh, that random ass man. Oh, he was a spy. Fuck him. Okay.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, like we never had barely any time with him, so I would not have assumed it was him. I would have assumed it was the one who kept fucking wanting the hydrogen bomb that kept like butting heads with Oppenheimer. So you're like, okay, you're a little sus. But then of course, yeah, it's the little quiet one who didn't say shit, and you're like, that's also a little sus. I should have suspected you because you didn't say anything. You're just sitting there listening. Don't trust you.
And also how, like you were saying, like how intense security was and how that also played into all of this stuff of like, hey, if you're going to be on this committee and if you're going to be a part of this, like all of it, and then them being like, no offense, we're scientists, we're getting fed up that we can't work under these conditions of like, hey, come help me do something, I can't tell you what it is, you got to commit. And the fact that they committed like 3 years and $2 billion, I mean, for all that
Which is
uranium, of course they had to fucking pay a lot of money for just that uranium. Never was I intrigued by marbles in a bowl in my life, and a movie was like filling up and you're like, oh, we're almost here, the uranium.
yeah, I was at first confused on what that all was the point of. Like, what I didn't understand what we were doing with the marbles. And then I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I just missed it when we first were having the conversation of what this all meant. But but yeah, there was also you had mentioned earlier about like Killian Murphy really disappearing, which there were so many moments where I totally forgot that it was Killian Murphy, which is crazy to think about because like I feel like if you're a consumer of any kind of media, really, especially celebrity media, I think we're so used to seeing uh, these people's faces everywhere. So, like, watching him fully disappear and me forgetting that it was Killian Murphy I was looking at and not Oppenheimer was absolutely fascinating to me. And his, I think this really showed, I don't want to say that he's a great actor. We've known that he's a great actor, but I think because there were moments in this movie where he didn't have a lot of lines and a lot of the acting was physical and or the camera was just like on his face and it was like a close up and it was all like internal, but you saw it through his eyes, which I think is something very interesting and crazy and cool that actors are able to do and portray and say things without saying anything. You know what I mean? And so I just think he's just so good, and I will like always praise him for what he does because I think it's really hard, especially immersing yourself in someone who's like a historical figure. I think is hard, um, because some people like will nitpick and be like, well, they didn't really do this or that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but he's still, like, it's still a hard thing to do. And of course, Oppenheimer is not alive anymore. So people can't really, like, nitpick too much. And there's not a lot of, at least from what I tried to research, there's not a lot of, like, video of Oppenheimer. There's, um, a lot more of his written theories and everything, which you can get a little bit from somebody, I think, through that. And I just really want to know what Killian's process was to get into. Also, this man learned Dutch. I was watching an interview with him, um, where the interviewer, she had asked about like how he learned Dutch, and I forget who in the crew knew Dutch. But Killian was talking about how he had him uh record on his like voice memos app or something, um, saying the lines, and so he would like slow it down and learn it that way, which I thought was super cool. And the Dutch was only in there for like a small part of the in the beginning of the
Right.
movie when he does the seminar in Dutch, which I think is so cool. Um, but yeah, no, I think also the beginning of the movie where we get a little bit about like his younger years, there was a lot crammed into a short amount of time. But I think it was done well because it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
too like jarring or too quick. It was fast paced, but I think to get to the main chunk of what the film was about, which was about the building of the atomic bomb, but then also the hearing after everything happened, I think it was great pacing, and I think that the writing really show. I really also just want to see the script. I want to see how the script is written
Mm-hmm.
to see like I don't know because there was like some really short scenes where it was just a couple like lines exchanged between two characters and then we moved on. But I'm just curious to see what how it's written and everything and if anything was cut out or changed or you know me, I just love to read scripts of movies and things. So but I lost my train of thought of what I was going for, but it'll come back to me
Oh,
eventually.
we made it to an end. No, no. Fuck. I was gonna add something too, and then my train of thought was like, oh, I was gonna say, adding to the pacing of it in the beginning. I think it also worked well because we were getting that from his older point of view, just simply stating, okay, so this is how my started here, and I went to this school and that. So then the editing and the cutting made sense of okay, we're just jumping because this man is pretty much kind of summarizing the beginning of his life and how he kind of got into physics and studied from his own point of view in a simple kind of hearing, which was nice. Like, okay, that made sense because we're hearing him talk about it. Then if it was just if we had no voiceover and we just got those shit and you're like, wait, what? I'm
Yeah.
here now to come. But I did want to add that I'm so happy with that they included my favorite president in the movie. My president, Fitzgerald Grant the third from Scandal. I was so happy to see him in this. I was like, yes, you better. Also, he was giving me too much. He's a phenomenal actor, director, but it was because he just played one of like the I don't even know what they were
Not the
like because it was so
councilman,
fast.
but
Whatever on the Kim whatever the hearing to this, I was like they weren't FBI. I think they were senators. I don't know whatever. But when he was saying like national security and closed it, it was like oh my gosh! I was like it brought me back. That moment brought me back to because I mean he doesn't change his voice because there's no need to change his voice from his president voice to his in this movie. But yeah, Tony Goldwyn, great guy. But I was like, yes, he better be in this. I mean, there's also so many random ass, and I want to say Christopher Nolan is one of the few people who can cast Joss Peck, like quit, like all these little unknown people. I mean, he did Harry Styles in Dunkirk, and I always go back to that because it's like people thought like because I was like Christopher Nolan, what you do? Like you know what I mean? But I'm like I don't doubt Christopher Nolan. He knows what he's doing, right? Because it's also like that's a lot of pressure when Harry Styles was doing Dunkirk. Like, oh wow, could they do a dramatic role? You've never seen them in that type of light, and this is a Nolan film. It is a dramatic film. So the fact that he can take these people and like actually direct them, and I think that speaks to directing because it's true you can act, but it's also like a director can really help you get there depending on your collaboration. And so seeing him, because I always think of like I when Harry Styles in Dunkirk versus Harry Styles in Don't Worry Darling. Yes, they're different characters, but then it's like showing me like the directing styles of like Christopher Nolan can do the fact that like, hey, yes, we're having Drake and Josh Boy come in here and be like, touch the is he gonna hit the red button in case it goes under one when the bomb goes off, but like that he I don't know, he's really good at directing like random people that you think like oh wow they're in this movie, that like he does a good job at like making these people really kind of like disappear and be a part of this world that he's built or this part of history that he wants to tell.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, I not we're mentioning like random actors here and there. Matthew Modine, is that how you say his last name? I don't remember. But he's an actor that I saw him on
Papa.
screen, and yes, and all I could think about was Papa, bro. And his voice forever in my brain will just remind me of Stranger Things. And so when he's
Mm.
talking, I'm like, I was just like, boy, where's Elle? She gonna beat your ass again. But I just thought it was really interesting to see like all the actors that Nolan did like group together. Um, was really interesting, and then also this is so dumb, but towards the end of the movie when Strauss, Robert Downey Jr.'s character,
Yeah, Louis
I
Strauss. Yeah.
Strauss. He when he his like image gets because I don't remember, was he running for like Senate or Congress or something? What
No,
the
so
fuck?
he was already in Congress, and what was happening is that the new president, President Eisenhower, which lol, Gary Oldman is flipping Truman, random ass cameo, but it's a Nolan movie.
But again,
So
the random ass people. Yep.
yeah, and the guy who played Einstein did a really good job too. I want to say.
Yes. Yeah, he
But
did really
anyway,
well.
so Louis Strauss was already a congressman, and he was being appointed to be in Eisenhower's cabinet. Now, to be in part of the cabinet, you have
Okay.
to be approved on a vote in Senate and the. I
Yes.
hate politics, but let me tell you a lesson in it. Senate and the House. So that's why he was being that. And we were later looking up. He lost, like they said, by 3 votes. So in a way, they were like being like, "Hey, you are may be able to scrape it by," but fucking JFK said, "Nope."
Thank you. That's yes. That's what I was gonna reference. Was like when not the reporter, but the guy whoever was like his
Well,
assistant or
his
something.
basically like his assistant, one of his
Yeah,
aides is what you would
was like
his job was.
reading the people who had like voted against him. The name drop of like he was like Kennedy, so he was like John F. Kennedy, and I don't know why, but I was like, I was like, bitch, oh yeah, you knew that. I'm like, you
Everybody
weirdo.
laughed. Everybody laughed in my theater because they were like, oh, some like first term senator trying to make a name for himself, Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and then everyone was laughing like, oh yeah, we know that, yeah.
Which is so, I don't know.
Rest
That
in
was like
peace.
I was like, why did I react like that? I was like, Jesus, but it was
Because you
I don't
actually
know
knew a name.
because I
You
actually
actually
knew it
knew a
was
name that they were throwing around.
dead ass, and
Yeah.
you're like, you're like John F. Kennedy. But yeah, no. I also did want to kind of brush a little bit on. I think Emily Blunt's character was Kitty, if I'm not mistaken. That was her name.
Hmm.
With the trailer, I didn't know. Because from the trailer we got a lot about, of course, and obviously Oppenheimer and creating the bomb, and we didn't really get a lot about like his personal life. So when the movie had started and you find out that he had like an affair with Gwen, no, what is her name? Florence Pugh's character.
I knew
It's
it,
not.
and then you said that name, and then it deleted from my brain. I was like,
It starts with a G,
what is? I thought
right?
it was June. June, I think.
June, girl. I don't know.
June.
We'll go with June.
I'll confirm it, but I'm pretty sure it's June. But go.
I think so. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna say June. But then you find out that he's having an affair with her. Bitch, nice phone
I'm
case.
just popping my Barbie phone on.
Um,
Ocha, rocha.
because I had thought, and I didn't know too much, of course, about his actual life. I had thought that like, I mean, you never know. No marriage is perfect, but I didn't know that there was. Are we both incorrect?
It's Jean, yeah.
Jean, but girl, combine the both of the names we put together. Okay,
Lol.
Jean. But no, I was surprised about like the rift that was actually between Kitty and Oppenheimer. I don't know why that like threw me off a little bit. Um, but I guess it was like a nice surprise of like how throughout the movie you see like the fact that their relationship, their marriage is not actually like perfect. That like she has her demons and the problems that she's going through, and he's also so invested in his work that he's like, uh, we have to give this baby to a friend because I'm not about to, you know. He's like, I don't have time to, you know, watch the kid, and you don't want, you're going through your own stuff. Um, but no, I just found that very interesting, and I think I really, really fucking loved the scene. First of all, I thought the man killed himself when um uh we just said her name,
He's
girl.
off the horse. Oh, with Jean.
With Jean, thank you. When Jean
Oh,
kills
like when
herself,
you run after him. Yeah.
and he gets the letter, and Kitty runs after him, and I thought he would like OD or some shit. I was like, what the fuck is going on? But when she like gets him up and is like, you need to fucking, she doesn't say this, but she basically is like, you need to get your shit together and focus, because all of these people here are like here for you and they need you, which I cannot fucking imagine, bitch. That fucking stress and turmoil going on in your head where you're like, okay, yeah, all these people are looking at you for what to do because you are like the and I'm paraphrasing, but like the mastermind of physics and all of this atomic bomb stuff. Like everybody's looking for you for answers, which I think is absolutely terrifying. And I can't imagine you slamming the door. I can imagine like what that does to your mental health. But then also like once the bomb was created and they did the test and the US government like takes it and he tries to still be a part of it and basically is like saying, I wouldn't recommend, because there's a line that he says to Matt Damon's character, or no, or someone, I don't remember, where he basically says like, oh, like the I would recommend like the farther up that you drop it, the less like impact it has, or something along the lines of that. And
Mm-hmm.
the person he was talking to was like, "Don't worry about it, doctor. Like we have it covered now." And I was like, that just goes to show you. Let me not talk shit about the U.S. government. But like that just goes to show you that like you literally cannot trust anyone. Like yes, they had chosen him because of his intelligence, which also like he ultimately was used for his intelligence to create this weapon of mass destruction. And then after that, when the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima happens, and he like that whole scene when it's on the radio and being like broadcasted and everything, and then he has to do that like speech to everybody. I don't know what was going on, but he does that speech, and then like uh what's it called? Everyone's cheering, but then like there's glimpses of like the woman with her skin burned, or like he steps on that body, and I was like, oh my
Mm-mm.
god! I was like, that makes me a little sick, but also like that is so not cool, but like within the context of the film, I was like, that is so well done, because you kind of get a sense of what's going on in his head, because yeah, he's getting all this praise for achieving this thing, but I feel like you see also this is a moment in the movie where I'm talking about Killian does a fantastic job of physical acting, where you see that tug and pull within him, where he's like, yeah, I'm really happy that I accomplished this and did this, but then he's thinking about like, holy shit, like all of these people are dead because of the thing that I invented. And then when he has that conversation with the president, and the president like takes his handkerchief and is like, "This is not about you," like blah blah blah. And I was like, I can't even imagine going through something like that in my life, where people are like, "Oh no, like people only care about who dropped it, not who made the bomb." And I'm like, oh, oh my gosh, like I would go insane. I think like I would drive myself crazy if I created something like that, and then you see what it's being used for. Like, how do you? I don't know. It's crazy, because I feel like at the beginning of this whole thing, he probably thought he was doing the right thing, within helping, but then there's probably that like turn in his head where he's like, I probably should have not fucking done this, which sucks. And like, ooh,
Because it was interesting, like on that whole topic of it, because that's the big thing of the moral like dilemma of it, and that they question him on, and like when Lewis Strauss is like, oh, he just wanted to be remembered for the Trinity, and that's what this is doing. Like he just wanted to be remembered for the test, right, for the bomb, but not for the dropping of it on the in Japan. So it's like Also, even the scene of when they're like going through, they're like, "Oh, we made 12 the cities that we're gonna drop in Japan," and then they're like, and then the guy, this secretary of, I don't know if it was state or war, was like, "I'm gonna cross it off because
We
what this cultural
honeymooned.
significance? Oh, nice, but also because I honeymoon there." And you're like, "I fucking can't."
The
Like that
lady
was fun.
next
That
to
was another
me,
like audience laugh.
yeah, the lady next
Yeah,
to me was like, huh. And I was like, girl,
but
same.
with the whole like moral dilemma, which like I believe the girl who had her skin like going. Also, when you hear like the shriek too, like talk about the sound like design where you hear
Oh
like when the
god,
people are
yeah.
chanting and then like he's like happy, but then it's also like even them cheering when the bomb goes like successful, and then you're like, but this is like, yeah, this is not great for what happened. But the fact that they're like, no, Japan will not surrender, and that's why we have to drop, these two bombs. One to show them what it is, and to show them that we can keep dropping it. And then you're like,
And they're just
okay,
literally like,
like. But that girl with this is actually Nolan's daughter. Those little cameo of her, yeah.
I love
So
that.
that's nice that he was like, yay, we'll do some fun day on set. Here you go, fucking have your skin be like coming off. Um, but with the whole like that, they did really well with it, thinking like, but I liked because you forget that he was Jewish, and this is World War II, and he's like when he goes back, he's like, I know what they would, what, like when he's talking with his friend who's also a New York Jew that he meets, who's also does physics, and he was a big person who was like, I'm not coming here, I don't want to make this, use centuries of physics for a weapon of mass destruction. He was like, but he's like, but you have to think like, yes, it doesn't mean it's in good hands in the US, but the fact that like what would have been hands in like Hitler, like what would he have done, what would have happened if they had that, race and beat it. And I thought it was interesting the line about anti-Semitism where he was like, that's kind of our like, in a way, like our win over them, because physics is done by a lot of Jews, so hopefully his hatred goes all the way through, that he won't think about these other ways that we're trying to make this bomb. And when they cheer, when they're like, oh, he's going the different direction, because they had Heisenberg, who was off, like Oppenheimer's like, this man is fucking amazing physicist, and he's on the enemy's side, right? So it's like, oh shit, like they've got great people. So it's like, oh yeah, finding them, like it was fun seeing little montage of them gathering the scientists of like, yeah, they have fucking people, like they have a team, we need to assemble, our team as well to make this happen. But yeah, that whole shit of him thinking like, and I really love to talk about physical acting, because again, like in a way it's almost hard when you're playing a real person, especially if you don't have them to talk to, or how much information you have of how do I portray, how did this person actually react to this news, right? And when they're in the building, they're showing the slides of the after effects of the bombings, and they're talking about the
Yes.
thousands of people who died, and showing the images, and all we see is his face,
And it just
is Cillian
pushes
Murphy's
in, yeah.
face, and you can just tell that he's like, oh yeah, you could tell as anybody who's helped make this thing of what it caused. Like it's, yeah, it's crazy. And then hearing Truman, you kind of were like, see, it didn't fucking like, they were gonna get the bomb, they were gonna get there anyways. We were going to at some point be making nuclear weapons, whether it started then or not. You know what I mean? Like in a way, we were kind of already led to there. But then I do love the whole thing with like, Einstein said this. What did he say to Einstein? And then he was like, Strauss, it's not about you. It could have been something more important. And then I love that they ended that scene with what he said, and how
Yes.
Einstein was like, I know what it's like for you to do something great for your country, and your country to be like, fuck you. Like, and then he's like, leave. And he was like, no, like, I love this country, which was funny, his love for New Mexico. And he was like, oh, I want to make like, and it's great that he knew that desert, right? Like to bomb it. But no offense, as being like a detective person, if I knew like, oh, Oppenheimer seems like he may be involved in some project, and if I knew him personally, I would be like, well, maybe they're in that desert that he's always fucking going to and talking about that he spent his time. But that was just me, because I was like, if I would have pushed it, but they obviously had tighter security details and stuff, and he was traveling a bunch. So from Chicago to back to Princeton, all that. So it was like whatever. But yeah, I was just thinking like, then it made sense. Oh, they're at a place that he's been to. Yeah, whatever, whatever.
I also think the interesting thing or the dynamic between, at least for me when I was watching it, the dynamic between Oppenheimer and Matt Damon's character, the sergeant, or I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Watching it, you at least for me, like in the beginning, I was like, ugh. I'm like, I think we all know, like, what his role is gonna be is to make sure that this bomb gets made, like, on time and delivered when it needs to be delivered. But there was a moment where, like, I think for me, especially when Matt Damon's character was talking to Oppenheimer about that one other officer that, like, had threatened to, like, kill this whole family, whatever. I don't remember the specifics of the conversation, but, like, he was basically
When
warning
Casey Affleck
Oppenheimer.
randomly showed up, yeah. No, so I would say when Casey Affleck randomly showed up.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
he played
that.
that character, yeah.
Yeah, this, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
But that at that point for me, I was like, oh, maybe it's because I'm naive or whatever. But I was like, oh, maybe, like, I was like, okay, well, so Matt Damon's character is looking out for him a little bit more than maybe what you would have thought. But then also there's that, like, double edged sword where, like, he's probably just doing that because of the fact that he wants all this information secret. And then the second the bomb gets created, he's kind of like, okay, bye. Like, fuck you. You did what you had to do. We, you know, used you for this and you did it. And so bye now. And you're like, which is also the other thing about the whole movie. I was like, who the fuck can we trust at all? Like, nobody you can trust at all in this movie because everybody wants, you know, something from Oppenheimer, and you're like, oh, jeez. I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I think, get, like, driven crazy because of the fact that, like, you have no idea who you can trust at all within, like, the government, but also, like, your own friends who are all physicists and trying to help you, and you're like, okay, well, I don't know. That movie made me so tense, and I just didn't trust anybody.
Which was a good thing because then you started feeling like when they kept questioning him too, like during how they also never like really cleared his security clearance for a long time. They're like, bitch, you're over here starting making the bomb and we have been still gotten your security because of your ties to the communist thing, which was interesting to find out that like, oh, he was just sending money when they say like, oh, he interested of the ideology, but he never joined, but he just wanted to talk about like, oh, like, progress in different ways how we could get there, and then how he was sending money through the Communist Party to get to Europe to aid the Jews who were over there to bring them over here. So it's like it was nice to learn that, and then it's like all these people were like, you put money in like through the Communist Party. You're like, okay, there's a reason why, and it went through it. It wasn't like for it to
Girl, this
support
is
it,
like
but
some fucking House of the Dragon shit where there's no communication, and you're like, bitch, this is why.
no, never, never, of course. But I do love like his relationship with Matt Damon's character, the general, because even at the end, where you think he's gonna like when they ask him the question like, oh, would you have proved his security clearance now, and you think like, oh, he's going to say no, and he does say no, but then he's like, but I wouldn't have proved any of those scientists, that they still had that good like bond, that they understood each other because they're very different men. But the fact like, oh, that he had an engineering background from IT, like he's a smart man, like, but he went through the military, and that he had like a respect for each other. And then on that train ride where he was like, well, if you want me to protect you, I also need to know what I'm protecting you from. Like, you have to give me a name in order for me to like put my back up. With the fact that he then had that one sergeant who was like really like his, detail and spy of Oppenheimer, Casey Affleck's character, moved away to kind of help Oppenheimer because he knew that the project would not be made without Oppenheimer. The fact that he came to him after everybody was like, I wouldn't put him as program director of the Manhattan Project, but he knew that that was the guy who was going to get the job done, even with his questionable, alliances and past and all that.
Yeah.
Just
Moral
a
of
good ass film.
Absolutely, moral of the entire thing. It's so good. If you want a film that is edited really, really well, um, it's written very well, and the performances are stellar. Um, Definitely check out Oppenheimer. I think it was an incredible movie, and I loved it, and I definitely want to go see it again. So I might go see it again in a couple of days or tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. But I did enjoy it, and I think it's my favorite Nolan film so far. Um, So yeah, I loved it, and that's
No,
all I
I
will say.
absolutely loved it too. I know people were, because when you were like, "What's my favorite?" and saying, it's like, I know it's hard for me to say if it's. I'm gonna have to watch it like a few more times, and then. But for me, I love like all of his films. Obviously, there's some that I, like you said, oh, this one related to me more of like the historical aspect of it and whatnot. But no, it's definitely like up there for sure. Just with the beautiful culmination of everything from like the crew and the cast, the story, and how they're able to bring it to life. That it actually is like a good ass watch, and I would recommend like anybody watch it because it's a good ass film and it feels like you're actually there learning a piece of history that I think everyone can take from and what that meant and where that's led us now, as a world, as a country. So 10 out of 10. Just kidding. Like I don't do numbers. I don't do that. 12 out of 10. 6 out of 7. 48 out of 9.
Oh, Jesus.
No, I hate. No, I'm giving it high numbers. I'm like, I just hate because the people come back and they're like, oh, this, and then, or when people like add up, or they're like cinematography 8 out of 10, this, and they're like, and total score 9.4, and then you're like, you know what? It was a good
It's a
ass
good movie.
movie, and that's all that needs to be said.
Yeah. I also really I can't wait to see more behind the scenes. Like I'm really intrigued to see how they did all this shit with no CGI. And if you go see the movie and you realize there's no CGI, you're gonna be like, wait, what the fuck? But yeah, there was no CGI. So I really want to see behind the scenes of this movie. So, anyway, we're gonna wrap on Oppenheimer. Definitely go see it if you can. It's incredible. And so now we are going to move into something a little more lighthearted. Uh, that's how I wanted to end my night last night. I was like, I am not. If I end my night with Oppenheimer, I'm not gonna go to sleep, and I'm gonna have an existential crisis in my bedroom by myself. So I can't have that. I need to end my night on a good, fun note. So went to see Barbie after. So we're gonna dive into Barbie now. Um, I was very pleasantly surprised by Barbie. I didn't know too much about what the plot was actually gonna be about. I knew that Barbie was gonna go into like the real world, but I didn't know too much more about that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I didn't know if I felt like I wanted to rewatch it, but I think definitely it's a movie that I can rewatch, and I will be rewatching at 9 o'clock tonight. So I'm going again to go watch it again because I had such a fun time. I think the pacing of the film again was really well done. But then also like the little subplots of like the patriarchy and like subtle social comments that Greta Gerwig put in, um, worked really well, and I feel like the movie is for like also kids who just really like Barbie and like want to have a fun, movie, but also for like the older girls or guys or anyone that can relate a little more to like the comments that are being made throughout the movie. So I think it's a great mix of like social commentary where it's not too much where you're like, okay, like we get it. Um, so I think I loved it.
No, I loved it. I mean, I love Greta Gerwig. I love a lot of her. Like, it's funny because with both of these directors, there are people I can like be like, I've watched every film that they've directed, that they've written. Like, so there are people that I admire and I adore, and I love Greta Gerwig, and I love, it was interesting her writing with Noah Bachman, her partner. I mean, they wrote like Frances Ha together, and then her directing this movie, and then just the behind the scenes of her. I don't know, just like first of all, just a woman behind the scenes directing is always like I love, but like her having fun and laughing on set and taking pictures, and first of all, like just with everything like design wise, like they for sure could like for sure deserve to be nominated. And like looking at her inspirations and how she had even like a little dream ballet, and like how singing in the rain, and it's funny, like the inspirations that she had are ones that I'm like, oh my gosh, I hold very much. Like I would love in a sense to like do a movie that's like this fun and exciting but yet has such powerful messaging behind it with their social commentary, and really diving into what it means to be a woman, but what it means to be Barbie, and all of that explained. But I will argue on the point of I don't know how many little kids would go like it's not a very kids movie in the sense of like there's too much that's like yeah that I wouldn't be like, hey, take my niece who's like 5 to go watch it. Like my mom was like, they should make a tamer version just to get money like to get like all the kids, because then you think of all the animated Disney Barbies, like what if we just brought that real life, you know how much there's some cash there. Like when they did it at
Girl,
the end where they're like, there's
the
money there in the ordinary Barbie. So there's money there.
I
To just
want a
make
live
live
action
action.
Princess and the Pauper, girl. That was my favorite Barbie movie growing up. I love that
That's a
one. I
good
love that
one.
one so much. But no, I
But
yeah, I
for
agree with
me,
that.
oh, no,
No, you
yeah,
go.
because it's like, no, like, and even the ending too, where she, spoiler, goes to the gynecologist. Like, there's some stuff that's a little like, okay, yes, like, definitely, obviously, PG-13 movie. But I really, I mean, also, I loved a lot of the cast. I love them. They're already people I like admire, so it was fun to see them in this. But I'm a huge fan of Barbie. I love Barbie. I loved playing with Barbie. I played a lot with Ken, so because I'm a tomboy, so I loved my Ken Barbies. So like Barbie, it was so much fun in the imagination. So just how much detail was brought into it of just the little mannerisms that they would do, and like the pouring of like the milk and the orange juice and the getting down, moving around, automatically just appearing somewhere, like even when they have like they're gonna put her in the box and they have like the twist ties, even though those were fucking annoying as shit to cut out when you're trying to get your Barbie, you're like, let me not cut her dress.
Absolutely. And you're like, I think I would cut her arm off, girl. I'm like, I gotta be so careful with these.
Yeah, you're like, fucking come on, and you're like trying to cut the Barbie out of the box. So just all of that details, the fact that I was talking to my family like, oh my gosh, we had a midge, we had a pregnant one, and we were talking about like the pregnant Barbie and how we had like a little baby. We're also like, where's the little girls, like Kelly, like it's a world that I love. So how much detail as a fan of Barbie, because I know that like if you're not a fan or if you are a fan, come watch this movie. Being a fan, I just appreciated just all the world building and the details, and also like, what it meant, and that we got to talk to see those scenes with the creator and what she meant, like for Barbie to be like, oh, enhanced for like her daughter Barbara, and then to see also like, look at Barbie land, right? Like we solved everything. And I think having the narrator be a character, right? Because I didn't know if it was like actually gonna be like, I knew they were gonna start with the 2001 reference, the only reference I like. I would watch a 2001 Space Odyssey if it was just Barbie, like that,
Absolutely.
like that whole reference. And then I loved Ellen Mirren being like, when Margot Robbie's there, like crying, like,
She's like, I'm
I'm
not pretty.
ugly.
Yeah.
And then she's like, note to filmmakers, this would be a lot more believable if Margot
If it
Robbie
was
was
not
like
Margot
cast. Like,
Robbie.
yeah, they're like, even though it's like, I love that they're like meta and they added those little things, because I found myself like laughing out loud like several times during a movie, which I'm like, shit, like if I'm embarrassing myself in front of like, which nobody was in my theater, like there's a few other people that added, but I think because I went to an early time, and because I think the previews, everybody was like, we have to see it now, we have to see it as soon as we can. Also, not many people were like, let me go to the movie theater at 12 o'clock. So that was also a plus of not having a bunch of people. But it would be interesting to like hear about like all everyone's reactions to it, and like the excitement, and like the little cameos, and even the soundtrack. I loved Lizzo's little opening song to it, that I felt very much like, and then her little comments in it. Like it's definitely a movie which you would appreciate, that you could watch again and catch little stuff out of and be like, oh, that's even funnier, or oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. But I think the message that it had for, I definitely think as a woman, it holds a lot more place, which I find a lot more Greta Gerwig movies. As a woman, she knows how to tell it because she is a woman, you know what I mean? Like, touch on those subjects that, like, make you feel like, oh my gosh, like, she understands, like, where you feel like, wow, like America Ferrera's speech, her first speech to the Barbies, where you're like, she nailed it of what exactly it means to be a woman, like right on the dot.
Absolutely. I think yeah, they were yeah, this movie's a great example of a movie that had me laughing at certain points, like laughing so hard that I was like but everybody was also laughing, so it was like a nice comfortable space to be able to all like collectively find certain parts really funny. But then there was, like you said, with America and her speech when she's like bringing all the Barbies back, or I forget what the reason was, but when Barbie is like having her little mental breakdown, um, and she's talking about like how, as a woman you can't be too, you know, I don't even know, but that monologue was so good that like there was a moment where like I got a little teary eyed, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, but like I got a little teary eyed because you're like, damn, you're like, yeah, that encapsulates to a T exactly what it's like, not wanting to be a woman, but what it's like to grow up from a little girl to a teenager to a woman. Like, there's so much that happens that I feel like people don't really talk about. Like, I was watching an interview with America, and she was talking about how what really like got her into wanting to do the film was the playfulness that was within the script, where and especially the character that she plays in the movie, that she found it interesting that the mom kept like the Barbie and like kept like all these playful mannerisms, even though she was like a grown woman, to still have that ability to have that imagination and be playful and be able to play around. And she was like, men get to have that all the time. They have their man caves, they have video games, they're allowed to still be childish, and like do all that, whereas a woman at a certain age, you're expected by society and other people to continuously work or be the housewife and clean and be the mother, take care of the kids. And so if you're ever slacking, quote unquote, or anything like that, then you've kind of like failed as a woman, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. And not true. I feel like this movie made me like, first of all, want to go buy Barbies and like play with Barbies again, because it just reminded me that nostalgia of like as a kid. Also, Weird Barbie is an icon. Who is moving your
Oh
camera?
yeah. No, sorry, that was my leg. That was my leg.
No worries.
No.
But yeah, I had a Weird Barbie growing up.
Sorry. No, of course. Also, we had like duplicates of Barbies, so we'd be like, okay, we can cut their hair. Also, because reason people cut the Barbie's hair is you think, oh, it's my hair, it's gonna grow back, and you're like, wait, this is fucking doll. The hair is not
You're like,
gonna grow
oh
back.
shit.
Yeah, no, Weird Barbie was amazing and everything to it, and I like that we saw like in real life drawing it, and then I forgot because they're like, oh yeah, she's always in the splits, and then until I saw them show the real girl put it in a splits and then kick it, I was like, yes, that is exactly what people did. They're like, I'm gonna put it a split and I'm gonna throw it across the room and not play with it anymore. And then the fact of how they were like Sugar's daddy or the magic earring one that they were like, and then they're like, this was a real doll. And the credits where they show you like, no, this was a real doll that Mattel put out, but was discontinued. Like, I think the narration helped so much to do it. I mean, it does help in the whole thing of imagination, kids, of whatever, the fact that there's like the weird portal between the worlds, that it like helped explain like, oh shit, no, this is real. Like it felt like us of being like, wait, what the fuck? Like this actually could be. Or like Alan, I loved Alan's
Michael
character, Michael
Sarah.
Sarah. It's
Like
like,
every time,
what about Alan?
even if like if he had no lines and the camera just like the camera was just on him and he's like, I couldn't take it every time.
Or when
It's
or
just
when
so
Ken's
funny.
upset and then he starts crying out, even though he's like, I hate it, yeah, I want to leave. But he was like, but he's Ken's buddy. So he's like, I feel bad for Ken. Let me help him. And I know because I watched interviews where they talk about like, and I like that they did in the film of, we created this doll and put all this stuff on it, and then it was like, and why are we getting angry at the doll for like, you sexualized, and like when they like
The teenager.
Sasha, yeah, the teenager, when Barbie comes to her and being like, oh my gosh, like, hey, and she was like, and then basically rails on Barbie, like, as many people now, current generation, are like, Barbie fucking did it. And then you're like, okay, it's a fucking doll. Also, like, Barbie didn't really do like any, Barbie didn't say, you gotta do this shit. Like, Barbie is an inanimate object. But with how much, like, reminds you, and I thought it was really well of how they did Sasha's character with her mom. Like, I was like, what the heck is her mom's name? I was like, do they ever say her name? Whatever. But America Ferrers. But I liked talking about design, like when she's working at Mattel America Ferrers and you see her pink shoes. and you're like, okay, she's got color to it. And of course, like I knew because I knew who played who. Like when you see the girl playing with the doll Sasha, you're like, oh, that's America Ferrer's daughter because I, watch the trailers, watch clips. Which some of this stuff, I don't know. Like thinking back, if I should have watched less clips and maybe been more genuinely surprised, I think I would have been for the film in that way. Like with like Ken's song and stuff like that, then maybe it would have been more like, because I had already seen that, but definitely still genuinely surprised you of like where they went, and I'm glad that they didn't put out like all their best jokes. You know what I mean? Like there was still so much a part that you're like, oh shit, like even the little okay the dog, because I had that dog, so I was like they have the fucking tan dog in the weird house and that was pooping, and I was like I couldn't like you're like this is so well like dang, like so well thought out that you're just like, okay, like they actually took time. Like if you're gonna make a Barbie movie, they were like, no, we're making a Barbie movie and we're going there with it. And then it was interesting the whole idea of spinning like Ken and Barbie going to their world and how that affected Ken, right? Because you were like, because I didn't think realize how much Ken was gonna be in it, right? Because you think like, oh, he gets pushed aside, and you're like, obviously that's gonna be an issue. And then how he goes and realizing this world where it's like, oh, men, patriarchy, and how he comes and brings that back to Barbie Land, and how that affects, which was funny when Margot Robbie comes and she was like, oh, this and this Supreme Court, and you're like, wait, what is all these horses and these fucking men doing? Which I find it, now thinking about it, funny that they did horses and like men with it, because when I was younger, I mean, Lord, looks kind of like a cowboy hat, but like I loved cowboy. I had a huge ass cowboy phase, and I say cowboy because I thought cowgirls were less than. So it's funny when you think of like toys, you always think, oh yeah, like cowboy, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it is like seemed like powerful. So it was funny that they were attracted with like they attached the horses and the men together, and then they were doing their little like galloping shit, which was funny. Getting okay, first of all, getting a whole cast to do that, where you're like, that's a beautiful power as a storyteller, where you're like, and everyone is invested, and I think that's what when it's so enjoyable is that everyone invested and gave their best for it, and it didn't feel like, I want to say artificial, but I didn't feel like people's reactions were too overboard. Like I felt like really, in a way, grounded, but I also feel like because Greta Gerwig, this is probably one of her first movies that's very like surreal and all that stuff. She's really more of like a realist, but I think having that background for her really kept this still grounded, even in this fantasy world, even in like even Ryan Gosling perfect. Everybody was perfect casting. Margot Robbie like perfect as Barbie and Ken and all the other Barbies and Kens and friends of Barbie and all that stuff. But like him giving that emotional work, it didn't feel like okay, this is like overboard. Like it felt still like real, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is a human feelings right here, even though this is a doll. But like, yeah, everybody, it didn't feel like it was too, because sometimes you're like, okay, like sometimes in comedies they go a little bit overboard in this shit, and you're like, okay, thank you, that's moving on. But and then their diversity too of like, it was nice in the dance party that they gave time, like good amount of screen time to the Barbie in the wheelchair and all that stuff, and that they had plus size, um, black, Hispanic. They had the trans actor playing the Doctor Barbie. Almost so when they pull out that ambulance and it folds down, and you were like, all the whole art department deserved all the people in this movie, like for that whole, the fact they painted everything and still gave that like she said, like old time Hollywood thing, like it was so, and it worked well even when they cut to the real world. And I like that they did make America's character, when she was like, Mom, you're like dark, weird, and crazy. And they let that be like, that's who I am as a woman. Because that's true. You don't usually get to see that type of like, I'm a mom. And I also love that her husband was like, I thought she didn't have a husband.
I literally straight up was like, this girl ain't got no dad. I was like, what the fuck? But then he on the couch doing Duolingo, girl. I was like, okay.
And then, because did you see the little Duolingo thing before? Like Barbie, the Barbie movie?
No.
Oh, they played like a little Duolingo ad, like in the movie theater, like in the previews, and it's like the Duolingo bird wearing like the cowboy, like the cowgirl outfit, and then it's like, and then it says something, and it's like, my pen is pink, and then it's like Duolingo, the number one language app in Barbie Land, and we're like, and then we were like, where the fuck is Duolingo going to be put in this movie? And then it was, worked a lot better than what I thought they were going to do. So it was like, oh, that's randomly
I
interesting,
did
the
not
random
see
ass
that.
like
That was not
product
in my
placement.
previews.
Maybe only at Regal Cinemas it was playing. I don't know, but it was
Maybe.
funny.
That's
So,
so funny. Yeah, I didn't. I didn't know
but he
about
was a
that.
real life Ken. He was a real life Ken. He was nowhere to be found unless it seemed important. Yeah. So I like that they gave equal time to like Barbie and Ken in the sense of what does it mean to be like a doll and have all these things. And then I do like, because then I thought, oh, they're gonna make Barbie Land equal, like equality. And then they were like, can we get one on the Supreme Court? And they're like, no, you can get a low circuit.
Yeah, you can
Like
no. Slow
let's wait
down.
there, like let us enjoy this. And then I like how Helen Mirren, the narrator, was like, it will reflect when it's reflected in the real world. Y'all can get your equality here in Barbie Land, because let us fucking enjoy Barbie, you know.
Absolutely. I also find it really interesting. I was watching an interview with Greta Gerwig, um, where she was talking about a little bit about the inspiration of what she wanted kind of the dynamic between Barbie and Ken to be. She took a lot of inspiration from Adam and Eve, from the story of Adam and Eve, which I found was pretty interesting. But she liked the dynamic of Barbie kind of being like not the centerfold, but like the more like powerful one rather than Ken being the powerful one. So then seeing like that power dynamic change, but then also when, like you said, when Ken goes into the real world with Barbie and sees like in the real world that men run everything and men are all over everything, uh and goes back and decides to do that to Barbie Land and make it Kendom with his fucking dojo mojo casa house thing, whatever the fuck. So fun. Listen, I think Ryan Gosling was fucking perfect as Ken. I laughed so many times with his deliveries and his physicality. Bitch, when Barbie, like towards the end of the movie, when she goes to like the house or whatever, but he has the saloon doors and you can clearly see him in the house and he's like running into shit and like cleaning shit up and he has the book on horses and he comes back, he's like, oh, you caught me reading. Thought it was so funny. And then I'll get back to what I was talking about before, but I was watching an interview with Margot and Ryan, and that book that he uses in that scene was actually a gift that Margot gave to him for whatever reason. Because I think like every day on set she would gift Ryan books or something. I don't remember fully the context, but he had
Oh, I
used
think
it.
it's. Oh no, I was gonna say, because my sister was telling me, was like, oh, that like they really wanted Ryan to do the movie, and he was like apprehensive at first. So she was like, I'll give you a gift every day. So then they gave him a gift every day on set to be like, see, I told you.
See, you did it. But I found it really funny that he used the book, one of the horse book that she gave him. Um, but going back to what I was talking about with uh Greta's writing on the dynamic between Ken and Barbie, I think is really interesting because I don't think we ever really see that in media where the woman is the successful one and the one that, essentially has like all the power and then the man is kind of like pining after her. It's typically always the woman pining after the man or two women pining after the same man, which I think is like not true sometimes. So I don't know why we keep doing that storyline. But I did love seeing that dynamic flip between where Ken is like, "My day's great when Barbie looks at me," or whatever the fuck that line was. And I was like, "Okay, dude." I'm like, "Good for you." But I really, yeah, I enjoyed the writing of it, and I think it also was written really well between like the dynamic between a mom and a daughter. I think was written very well. Um, because then you do see like in the beginning where Sasha is more so like, ugh, mom, like, she's a teenager, so she's like, I don't want to hang out with you anymore, this and that. But like the mom keeps one of the Barbies and like keeps it for herself or whatever to like hold on to those memories, which I think is really sweet because like, yeah, you don't really think about like how your life changes as a woman when you become a mom and then when your child like specifically when your daughter grows up and becomes her own person, that you're like, oh shit, you're like, now, how that all changes when you grow older. But no, I love that. And the fucking scene where they're playing the guitar, where he's like singing a
That's I was
song
gonna
to
say.
her.
Oh, I love how they undo them, how they undo the cans where they like make them all
Yes.
jealous. So like, I gotta leave and come and like,
Like, hold
I
on, I'll be
just
right
love that whole
back.
commentary of like, they're like, how do we get them out? And they're like, okay, so you have to distract like them, like pretend that you're damsel in distress. And I love also that she was like, I don't know how to use Photoshop. And I love how like that was used, because you would think like, oh, that's random, like Photoshop, but it's like, it's true, because bitches know how to edit and do all that stuff that you would think like, oh, computer stuff, that's all like boys, or I don't know how to do Photoshop, or explain the Godfather to me.
That shit had me absolutely rolling. Wait, we're saying, oh my god, can we start from the beginning and can you talk through the entire thing?
But because Greta, I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is Lady Bird. Like Greta Gerwig knows how
Yeah.
to write a mother and daughter relationship. She knows how to do it, and I like the twist that like when they're like, you'll know right when you find the girl who's playing with you. I like that the twist that it was the mom who was playing with the
Me too.
doll, right? Like still holding on to that, and like she was the one doing the designs. I do love when like Barbie, Margot Robbie's Barbie has like an existential crisis, and then they cut to the ads of like, oh my gosh, this is
Depression
depression
Barbie.
Barbie. It gives me like SNL vibes of when they'll do like the commercials where they're like, hey, and she wears sweatpants all day and this, and you're like, is watching Pride and Prejudice for the
I
7th.
felt too attacked. I felt way too attacked with
Yeah,
that.
no, they really they like, I
And I
don't
was
know,
like,
this it was just so well done.
only a woman
Yeah.
could know and like could write that, where every woman in the theater was like, oh shit, we're getting red for filth right now, and it's all accurate. So
And Margot Robbie was like, I couldn't get over like how perfect she looked. Like even her hair. Her hair was like so perfect in this film. Like I don't it's fucking crazy. Like the hair department was like top notch. Like how well she looked. And like I love that they always change their outfits, like when the song thing, and like 4 hours later, and they're wearing outfit, because like that was so true as a kid. You're like, we're going somewhere, I gotta change my outfit. Or she even mentions it when she's with them, the mom and the daughter, and she was like, then we get to change your outfit again. It's like that was a highlight though of like just
oh yeah.
changing the clothes of like, so yeah, it's just so nice of how well thought out. It was such a good, and it's nice talking with you. And then like yeah, I was like smiling the whole time watching this. I mean, there was parts obviously I wasn't smiling, that I was like, this is, it is just
Ugh.
when people are joking like you're laughing and crying, like in a sense you are in this movie, like that it was so enjoyable that like here talking with you and like smiling again of like how like perfect it was, and like told, and in such like a, I don't know, in a perfect way. And I'm happy and I'm glad that it is making a lot of money, because women, like, wow.
Absolutely.
It's also sad that like, oh wow, this is the biggest opening for like a solo female director, and you're like, in what year is it? Like,
Yeah, like how many movies have been solo female directors?
you're like, shit. But then and like, and I think it only made sense that it was a like a woman. Who else knows Barbie better than fucking, who it was made for, in a way, even though my brothers played with Barbies too and all that stuff. But like, yeah, with how perfectly, I'm trying to remember what else that was like when you were talking, that was like, that was a good like add in or whatever. But no, I like how everybody played it. Simu Liu, Shang-Chi. No, I'm just kidding. Let me not refer to him as the only. Yeah. He also, I think, only him and Ryan Gosling could be like the two leading
The
Kens,
two
with like even
Kens.
they're doing the whole dream ballet sequence and dancing, like they really played that perfectly. So I'm really, yeah, I don't know, the whole, and I remember them saying that they even had like Simukten, Issa's Barbie, like she even wrote that, Greta Gerwig, like knowing who she wanted. And I think that can tell for both Oppenheimer and Barbie of like, hey, knowing in mind like who they wanted to play, right? Like having that person in mind, and clearly them like obviously like stepping up and delivering and being like perfect for it, which I think helps obviously when you're like, I wrote this, now let me think, who could it be? So I'm happy with it, and I feel. I mean, obviously, we'll wait. There's always going to be hate comments on anything, especially when something's so big. People, and even I fucking hate the thing of I was hearing like somebody like, "Oh yeah, this woke." I mean, that's more like very hard right conservative shit when they're like woke da da da, which I hate, but yeah.
There was and I've been seeing it on the internet a lot where the some people think that like this movie is promoting like anti-man or like anti-mother, anti blah blah blah. I'm like absolute. I'm like after watching the movie, I don't think that one bit. I think if you
Mm-mm.
are assuming that this movie is anti-man and blah 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 blah, then you're part of the problem. If like you don't see the dynamic that is going on and the power imbalance that is happening now within society and that's always been between men and women and that issue, then I think you need to look into yourself and see why that makes you uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable with the fact that these social comments are being made, where, you know, I mean, there's that scene when they go into Barbie world. No, they go into the real world and they're on those roller skates and she's wearing that leotard and she looks fantastic. And then they go to the construction site. She's like, she's got a construction site. She's like, women, let's go. And she goes and it's these burly men and she's like, what the fuck? And they're all like, saying some nasty shit which men say all the time. So as a woman, you hear it all the time. But then also like, oh, it made me so angry, and it's only like not too long of like a scene. It's pretty short, but like, it was just so annoying because like, ew, like it's just so irritating. But no, I think these comments, if they make you uncomfortable, then I think you need to evaluate why it makes you uncomfortable, why you're uncomfortable with women having more power and women expressing um, their experiences in life. I think is incredibly unfair because if a man, you know, comes out and expresses what his life is like and yada yada whatever, and then you have a woman do it, I feel like people don't take the women seriously as often. And it goes back to the whole thing of like, oh well then, like society deems that women are complaining all the time when it's not true at all. Like we're just sharing experiences with one another, and I think only women can relate to each other in that aspect, because not that men don't and can never get catcalled. It happens, I know, but it happens more to women. um and I saw a TikTok where this one girl was like, she's like, there's nothing like getting catcalled after watching the Barbie movie. She was like, that really shows you the reasoning why this movie's important. And like the comments that are being made on the movie that it's anti-man, it's not anti-man. That's not the point of it, to be like, no, fuck all men. It's more so, hey men, watch this movie, or like listen to the women in your lives when they tell you about what it's like to be a woman. So I don't know. I think it was a really good blend of like social commentary, within like the funness that is Barbie, and the comedy and everything was balanced really well. Yeah. So we are going to wrap it up here. Um, yeah. So long story short, go double feature it, or
Mm-hmm.
watch one movie one day, the other one another day, and just support these incredible films that were written and directed by incredible artists, and you'll have a really fun time. And yeah, Hannah, any last words, any last thoughts?
Happy Barbenheimer to all.
And to all, a good night. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the episode. Let us know if there are any TV shows or movies you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. And yeah, we will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye. Haha.